Hi, Moses. I want to thank everybody for chiming in. And if you get a chance in comments, my name is Sherry and I have Moses here. And we are Progressive Talk Radio on TV, but for how much longer? So I want to ask Moses first what he's got on his plate as far as news stories and what he wants to talk about. And then we have some big news closer to the end of the show. So welcome, Moses. Welcome, audience. What do you have going?
Hey, Sherry, good morning. It's a beautiful Sunday, and there's so much going on in the world right now, but obviously the big deal is that balloon, that Chinese, quote, weather balloon that has been flying across the U.S. I'm assuming everybody, all of the viewers here have seen the articles about it and seen the images of this balloon that has been flying over parts of the U.S. And they've identified it as a Chinese, they call it a weather balloon, but more than likely, according to the U.S. government, it was a spy balloon, because it was going over some pretty important places in Montana, nuclear facilities. That's been an interesting one. Sherry, I tell you, I've had to laugh, though, at some of the memes that have been going around about that Chinese balloon.
What have you seen?
Oh, I've seen a couple of good ones where, they've substituted the balloon for that big, ugly orange Trump balloon that they were using to mock the president.
Oh, my goodness.
Or underneath the balloon is a big box of Chinese takeout.
Oh no!
So there's been some really bad jokes about it all, but it fundamentally, though, it is a concern, because if you look at it from the purely political point of view, nothing happens by accident. This balloon did not just accidentally fly over the U.S. It's been controlled. It can be controlled where it's going. So there was a conscious decision made by the Chinese government to float it over the U.S. And that our government, I'm sure, as soon as that crossed into our airspace, they started jamming those signals, and preventing those things from happening. I mean, I got to give our government credit for having the high technology to be able to do something about that. It's not like it's just coming over and they're being, nothing we can do about it.
Right.
I did see a great meme, though, where they had placed there's an image of the fighter jet that finally destroyed it. They sent a missile up and and blew it up, and it landed in the ocean. They had set that whole image, that situation. They'd set it all up on with the background of Leonard Skinner's Freebird.
Oh, wow.
I know, it was so funny because, because in that song, Freebird, we're going to change, and he starts to jamming out. Yeah. And then right then the missile hits the balloon.
I so have missed that. I didn't see that at all.
It was pretty funny. It was pretty funny. So I like how we're taking a good sense of humor about this, and all the memes just write themselves. But, fundamentally, it was a pretty worrisome situation, and quite frankly, an invasion of our space, of our airspace, So I'm pleased. I'm satisfied with how our government has dealt with it. We shot it down. If there's going to be others, they're going to do the exact same thing. I don't think it's compromising any of our security in any of that sense. It seems like it's just a tactic by the government, the Chinese government, to kind of poke the bear, if you will. So
the Defense Department stated that they believe the Chinese balloon was surveilling our military installations in that region over South Carolina. And that was a large part why they chose to go ahead and shoot it down. Yeah. The comment that I saw that was really troublesome, especially Americans just being Americans, is they thought it had COVID in it. So they shot it down over the sea, right? I mean, come on.
I don't. Maybe, I don't know. That seems a little over dramatic as far as if you're going to infect a country with COVID, you don't do it by a balloon and, just kind of drop it in the middle of nowhere.
Well, and China has said that it's nothing more than a meteorological tool, like the US uses balloons in many cases for meteorology. That's what the Chinese said it was going to be, but they have lied to us so many times with their attempts to extract security information from our internet systems and different spying that they do. How are we to believe them? Mm-hmm. Right. And they've stolen some of our most highly sensitive technology plans, mm-hmm. and the ways to build chips and stuff like this. And so we have some really big issues dealing with China in this regard.
In this regard, we sure do. I've always thought that, these are tests. They're testing our resolve. They're testing our security when they do things like this. It's like flyovers near Taiwan to see whether or not the allies are going to actually respond to a Chinese jet that flies over, within the Taiwanese airspace.
Yeah.
They're just kind of testing our resolve. And this was just another example of that. I think it wasn't a very subtle one. That's for sure.
No, not at all. Well, they said that the wind took it. And apparently there's been no evidence of a strong enough wind gust to take it. Right. And you're right. It can be remotely operated. So what are they doing? What are they looking for? And the closest I've heard from my, lack of knowledge, but is surveilling the military installations and what our people are doing, how they're training and stuff like that.
Well, I saw this video of the guy from Billings, Montana that had filmed it for the first time. And, he was outdoors. He saw this. He wasn't sure what it was, and he knew it wasn't the moon. He knew it wasn't a UFO, so it is what it is. And then finally it got confirmed that it was a Chinese balloon, weather balloon, which sure. Okay. But you're absolutely right. It's kind of concerning. And, up there in Billings, there's more than one nuclear facility up there. Nuclear missile facility.
Yeah. There's naval installations in South Carolina, all up and down the East Coast. They have naval installations just like we do here on the West Coast.
Sure. I can't help but think about, like, for instance, in the Ukraine and the challenges that they have had to be able to assess the Russian response or the Russian offenses into the Ukraine. You've got to get up high enough to you can see the facilities and see the movement and see where everybody is at.
Right.
And, isn't that ironic that in those situations, it's okay that we're being spied upon 60,000 feet above us. But, God forbid when our enemies or our adversaries are doing it, it's, morally wrong, you see.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Definitely. Yeah.
So I think, as I say, I think they were just trying to poke the bear a little bit and kind of see what kind of a response that they would get. It certainly was not something that could be deemed a real threat per se. Okay, so I would venture to say that the Chinese government has spy satellites that are just as, if not more so, effective at learning that sort of thing, of seeing that sort of thing. So I think it was just a kind of a PR stunt to poke Biden a little bit, to poke the U.S. a little bit.
Maybe for sure.
Hopefully.
Speaking of which, we are running it. It's 2023. We are 18 months in front of the next presidential election. Nikki Haley has just announced she hasn't formally announced, but she's given notice that she's going to announce she's running for president. She's the first one of the Republican Party to come up against Trump. What are your thoughts?
Great question. When it comes to the tolerance of Trump within the Republican Party, I think it has gotten to the point where the Republicans are not as lockstep as they had been with Trump, and they want alternatives. I mean, it's the accumulation of all these years of what he has done and the lies that he has spread and such. So I think it would be very foolish of the Republican Party to renominate Trump. He's going to try his damnedest to be that default, to exert enough political power where to dissuade folks like Nikki Haley or legitimate competitors to come up against Trump. Because if that happens, Katie, bar the door. It's going to be just a bloodbath. I mean, right. Figuratively speaking, like for instance, let's say Ron DeSantis, the governor down there in Florida. Everybody's talking about how he's preparing himself for a presidential run. Who can out-Trump Trump?
That's what I've been hearing.
And that just blows me away. That how can you get even more extreme than Trump was? I was hearing something, and it made me start to think. You're familiar, of course, with the Congressman George Santos.
That's the next thing I wanted to talk to about.
Yeah. Let's tie this in. He is kind of the epitome of. He's taken it to the nth degree. This whole concept of projection of conveying this reality that is only his reality and making it actual reality. You see what I'm saying? Trump was a master at doing that. No matter what are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Right. And he understood that in propaganda, if you say a lie long enough and hard enough and consistently enough, it becomes a reality. It can become a reality. And so you've got somebody like George Santos who has taken that and exploited it to the 10th degree. He actually ran his entire campaign on a made-up persona and a made-up background, and he has yet to deny any of it. Right. He's just like, so this is my reality, and if you don't believe it, it's not your. It's very strange how this disconnect from reality is being actually embraced by parties. Right. Well, and the thing is they're trying to say, commentators and pundits are trying to say that the Republicans want the Americans to believe that government doesn't work. And this has been a long time trend. Republicans break government to show people that it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Because if it does work in the way that it's supposed to, which it did for the past few years, you see us thriving and starting to be prosperous. And we have some inflation, but that's being diffused currently. What the pundits are saying where Santos is concerned is literally the Republicans have embraced Santos. And because he's showing Americans that you can be a liar and a con and all of this stuff, and you're going to be accepted into committees that create our laws, things that impact us. And hell, let's take that one step further. They've already got people on House committees that were basically traitors. Yeah. That we're trying to overthrow our government on January 6th. Yeah. And yet they put them into positions of power and legitimacy that just boggles the mind. Yeah. The fact that, we would accept that they would accept those lies, that they would accept for the sake of getting elected, pure and simple, for the sake of obtaining power, that they would just simply lie and prove me wrong, kind of a lie. Right. Once again, what are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Right. And so what would a United States look as if Nikki Haley were president? What would that look like? Well, I don't want to get too dramatic, and talk worst case scenario, but it would just be a perpetuation of Trump era policies, unfortunately, because she's catering to the exact same audience that Trump is. Yep. exact same. They all are, and it's a small minority. That's the funny thing. None of them have begun to realize that they have none of them have begun to have realized or have applied traditional political strategies of going to the extreme during the primary and then running to the center in the general. Trump didn't give a shit. He didn't care. Pardon my French. He didn't care. He stayed off there to the extremes.
Right.
And someone like Nikki Haley, that's her audience as well. She has to motivate those same types of people that Trump was trying to motivate to go out and vote. And so I don't see too much of a difference between the two of them. She might come across as somewhat moderate, but and the fact that she is a woman and the fact that she was her background is Indian American, that helps sell her to the masses. But when you come right down to it, philosophically and law-wise, philosophically and politically, there's no difference between the two, really.
Right. I mean, right. That's true.
They've just they have over the last 4 years, because of the success of Trump, they have embraced that approach, that type of a restrictive, that type of an authoritarian, that type of a I know better than you do philosophy, and they just don't care. I just don't understand that. It's like I keep thinking back sometimes about that whole, what was it, that Lincoln line? You can fool some of the people some of the time, all the time, Right. Well, that's some of people. Some of the time here is a 30% of the population.
It's 30 to 35%. Yep.
And that's what just blows me away is this loss.
And they're winning. They are stomping all over everything, but they're only 30%. When did we get minority rule in this nation?
Well, because this has been a long time coming, quite frankly. This was all part of their plan originally to take over the state houses, the state legislatures to, in time for redistricting, in time to allow them to be able to redistrict to their advantage. And so you have that in many states, like Florida is a great example of it. Here's Ron DeSantis winning re-election to governor, suppressing votes on one hand, making it harder for others to vote, minorities to vote and communities to vote, but yet appealing to a large enough group where as long as they come out, he'll win. Right. So it's a real challenge right now. And I really like how President Biden is confronting it. And you're going to see a lot more of this over the next couple of months, because after the State of the Union, I predict, I'm almost positive, 99% positive, after the State of the Union, he will announce his run for re-election.
I was going to ask you about that. What do you think? Should he run to get reelected?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think age is an issue?
Oh, they're going to try to make it an issue. Well, of course they will. They're going to try to make it an issue, but I don't think if you have to hang your hat on a person's age, and they can hang their hat on actual accomplishments,
right?
I think accomplishments trump age.
Yeah,
and I give him a lot of credit. Over the last 2 years, he's been doing these programs, and he's been dealing with the pandemic in a way that's been beneficial to us. That's been helping the common person get through it all.
Right. Yes.
And from a political marketing standpoint, he's got everything he needs.
He does. Yep. 516,000 jobs in January. That will probably be revised down, but it's a 3.4% unemployment rate. That is the lowest since 1969. And it's incredible.
Admittedly, agreed. And, we're talking numbers that we haven't seen since Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
As far as unemployment.
Yeah.
And, And I venture to say that, though, in the next year, even before the presidential campaigns really get hot and heavy, like they will here at the end of 23 and the beginning of 24, you're going to see more and more of these improvements, more and more of these beneficial policies that will help America.
Right. Which
that he can then in turn point to during the presidential campaign.
Yes.
And he's smart. He's going to hang. That's the cross he's going to die on, is all these things that he has done for the U.S., and then he'll tie it back into the same theme that he did in 2020. And that was reclaiming the soul of America. The extremists are over here. Look at what they are doing. We're over here. This is what we are doing. We're maintaining and retaining that fundamental value as Americans, those fundamental values as Americans, and that does not include separating children at the border. It does not include excluding excluding communities from being able to vote. It does not mean, cutting Social Security and Medicare like the Republicans in the House want to do.
Right.
Talk about a non-starter.
And a 30% national tax.
That's crazy. And that is just ironically, that's been a sticking point for Republicans for years, this whole idea of revising the tax structure. So, putting it so you can just file your taxes on a postcard. That is so amazingly unrealistic. And it's not very equitable. It's not equitable at all. Yeah. I mean, if I'm paying the same rate, if there's a flat tax rate and someone making $20K a year is paying the same exact rate as somebody making $150,000 a year, that's not fair.
Right.
It's got to be a progressive tax, in that sense. So, these are just tropes. These are fantasy positions that the Republicans have been using for years to try to stimulate their base, to try to excite their base. And now all of a sudden they're in a position of power where they can do something, and they're finally realizing how asinine these positions are, how extreme these positions are. It's all on the table now. And so,
are they realizing it? Because it sounds to me like they're going to push through.
And it ain't going to go nowhere. It might go through the House, and they might be able to keep a majority of the Republicans on board with it. And then from there, it's going to go to the Senate, and it's going to die. And even if it was to go through the Senate, Joe Biden has his veto pen out, ready to sign it.
Yeah.
To sign a veto against it. So it's all theatrics. It's all stimulating the base. And that's what the Republicans are doing. They're trying to really stimulate their base to try to make sure that they have a chance come next term, come the presidential cycle. And you would think that they would be learning from what happened in the midterms, But no, they're all in, and God bless them.
What would you think if Mike Pompeo got in? Who do you see Biden doing the best against, I guess, is the question, or being the hardest for Biden to overcome?
If that's one of the reasons that Nikki Haley got into the race, is because she's the antithesis of a Trump. She's a woman, she's foreign born, she's a governor.
Well, she has to be born here to be president.
Right. I should say that, her parents came from.
Her parents, she's a family immigrants.
Right. And point being, though, is that she has that image of not necessarily of moderation, she doesn't come across as an extremist. But when you start digging deep, they all have the same positions. She agreed, just like Trump did, to take out any mention of Russia out of the Republican platform in 2020. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. But to your point, Joe Biden, they're going to hit him hard on his age. Of course they are, because it's one of the few things that they can hit him with. And, they're going to contrast that with the youth and the enthusiasm of someone like a Ron DeSantis.
Right.
And the only option that he really has is to really emphasize, what have I done for you lately?
Right. Right.
And Trump can't say that anymore.
No.
He hasn't been able to do anything for anybody. It's all been about him.
Right.
And many of these Republicans are falling into that same trap. So, I venture to say Joe is going to have a much easier time of it this year with his reelection because of that. Because we've had 2 years of what they have done, and we have 2 years of what he has done.
Right.
We have a track record now. And all these things that came out about Trump during the January 6th committees, and all these lies,
but Americans have a very short attention span and a shorter memory. So how can we as citizens on the street in cities and towns all over the nation remind voters of what our choices are and what the ramifications are for making the wrong choice?
Good question. I think a lot of it has to do with people like you and I in media that try to get the word out and share good, correct information with voters. It's going to take candidates that are not cowardly and actually confront these issues head to head. I venture to say that if I'm a candidate in 2024, not for president, even for any particular spot, you're going to have to, the more, not aggressive, but the more that you come right out and you talk about these issues and confront them head on, the more people will have respect for you for doing that.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to hide behind, phrases and platitudes, come right out and say it. Be aggressive about it. This is them. This is us.
Yeah. And that's give, not to tout credit to him, but that's how Trump did what he did. He committed a lot of crimes, but he told us what he was doing as he was doing it, right? And a lot of us paying attention were like, whoa, he's not supposed to be doing that. But the people who, a large portion of the nation doesn't pay attention. So nothing was really said. He's breaking laws and he's telling us what he's doing. What are we supposed to do?
There was a great cartoon there. I saw in the New Yorker cartoon or something like that, where these sheep. Okay, imagine a field, and there's and all these sheep are in the field, and there's a billboard, and it has a wolf on it, and I'm going to kill you or something like that. His line, as a candidate,
right,
and the caption underneath has the sheep talking. Well, he sure is honest, words to that effect. Point being is that at least he tells you what you're going to do. I am going to eat you.
For sure. Yes, definitely. It's like, hello, I'm going to eat you, so you better be ready for that. I am checking time because we have a huge announcement. Do you want to go there?
Let's do it. I'm excited.
Yes. I'm super excited. We found out a couple of weeks ago. Moses, you say?
We will be moving our show from cable access to Cable Radio starting in March. And Sherry, I tell you, I'm so happy that Sherry has been the one that's been that's really taken the ball and ran with it. Actually, Sherry has become a board member at KBOO, and that's what kind of got this whole thing started. Was you realizing the resources and the reach of KBOO, and which is obviously, if you live in Portland, KBOO is a FM radio station. It's has all sorts of reach, reaching tens of thousands of people every single day. And you and I have done the cable show out there at Willamette Falls Media Center for years.
Yeah.
And I think we're ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're ready. We're ready to go. We're ready to take it up to that next level.
Yeah.
And it's been quite the learning process with you on how to put together a show and to make it engaging. And we're still learning.
We are still learning, but you had a foundational structure in your head that we finally got laid out on paper. And I'm so thrilled that we were able to do that, because now we have a framework from which to work on. And we'll need that, because where we have visual here, you don't have visual on radio. Yeah. Right. So it's a tremendously different process. However, we may be able to live stream. So we may still be live streaming on Facebook and YouTube and TikTok. Right. I'm super excited for being able to do that. So not only, and when I edit this video, I'll be giving news streams on the top and bottom. Not only will we be live streaming from the studio, but they have an app. They have a phone app. You can listen to KBOO no matter where you are across the nation.
That's cool.
Through the KBOO app.
You know, and the funny thing was let me give everybody some quick history too. About 15 years ago, Dr. Caleb Burns started progressive radio on TV, and he started it. He was a devotee of Tom Hartman, and Tom Hartman, and that's what got him. Gave him the idea of doing the cable access TV show. Was to the local radio stations did KBOJ. We used to have one or two progressive radio stations in Portland. Unfortunately, they didn't work out, and so there was a dearth of information for left-leaning folks and progressives. And so he took this concept to Willamette Falls Media Center and was doing this show as the host for many years. Yeah. And I would come in and I would be his co-host. He had me come in and co-host with him. And it was just a thrill of a lifetime to be working with Dr. Burns, you know, and he's such an opinionated guy. And he's taught me so much over the years as far as just articulating what your positions are and feeling comfortable with them. That's one thing I really always respected about Caleb. He was always so adamant and firm in his views.
Yes.
And you just had to respect that. I loved that.
Yeah.
You knew exactly what you were going to get, and he was articulate enough to be able to express it.
Yes.
And so to continue on with the story, you know, so for many years, Caleb and I did it. And then you came involved and you were doing production there at Willamette Falls, and you were helping us there. And then sometimes you'd come in and co-host. And sometimes I'd do, all three of us would come in and co-host. And we were just getting some really good experience with all of this. And then unfortunately, Dr. Burns had some health problems a couple of years ago. And that's when I decided to go ahead and keep it going. And then you and I kept the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And this last year, you really kept the ball rolling for us to keep this out there and keep this going, because I got my time. I had a conflict on Tuesday nights when we would normally do that show.
Right, right.
So you had your opportunity to be able to get some good experience with this. And then
I have,
yeah. And so having said all of that, so here we are. Sherry goes and gets onto KBOO's board, realizes the opportunity that we have there to be able to make this transition into a bigger medium, and ran with it. And it's just so exciting. You know, both of us have been going through training. You're ahead of me on the training, but KBOO makes you take all of these volunteer orientations and trainings to be able to learn how to use the KBOO system, how to do live radio. You know, news reporting, newsroom work, or be it on the boards and the programming of it all. You know more of that than I do. And so I've been trying to catch up to you on your on the prerequisite classes that KBOO has you take before you can actually do a show.
You'll get there.
Yeah. Long story short, we'll be ready by March for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and in March, that's when we'll be starting our new KBOO show. Currently, it'll be once a month. We are shooting, perhaps, if things go well, maybe twice a month on the same day, same time each, but yeah, the sky's the limit. And it's a great way to go. And it's very exciting, Sherry. I'm really thrilled about it. And I just want to encourage everybody that's listening or watching right now, come join us over there and stay in touch with us and help us out. Share this with your friends.
Yeah.
We're still going to be doing the live streaming on Facebook and in other mediums like that, online mediums. So we'll still, you'll still be able to see our shining faces. But radio, one of the challenges with cable access was that the audience kept decreasing and decreasing and decreasing because less people watch cable TV.
Right.
It's all streaming now.
Yeah.
And when I first got into it back in the day, everybody was watching cable access. It was the only option. It was really the only
basically
option.
Yeah.
And old Portlanders remember fondly some of those, Jim Spag on cable access, some of these characters that would show up on late night cable access shows, and these were just people trying to express themselves, and get their opinions out there. A little strangely with this particular guy, Jim Spag, but that's a whole other story. That's a whole nother story. But this is 90s. This is back in the 90s when cable access was just starting out.
Yeah.
And people were able to use, and the whole concept behind cable access was to be able to give the common person, the individual, a forum and to be able to do just that, get their show, get their experience. And, that's what we did. And now KBOO.
I've had a love affair with radio for many, many, many years. I wanted to be a DJ. When I was in 5th grade, I decided I wanted to be a DJ. And the reason why is I wanted to meet all the musical stars. And I wanted to go around to the different shows and do sound and stuff like that. I had a whole plan in my head to do this. So in 93, I went to broadcasting school. I graduated in 95 and my whole life fell apart and everything, and I had to leave. But I used to volunteer, as you know, volunteer at KBOO during that time. And when I came back, it took me a while. It took me to get that level of commitment, and I've had to get settled in. But Jill, one of the board members, reached out and asked if I wanted to be on the board. And I wasn't sure I'd be able to volunteer anything because I'm all the way out in Molalla, right? I'm in rural Kitsap County. And she's like, we're doing everything since the pandemic. We're doing everything outside of the studio. You can record what you want to record and upload it to our audio craft. I forget the name of it, but it's Audio Soft or something, and upload it there and we'll broadcast it out. And I've been doing promos for them. So my voice is being heard in Portland, and I'm so excited, and you helped make this happen, and I really appreciate it.
Isn't that so cool? I'll have to admit, I'm like you. I'm seeing this opportunity as a way to get back into radio as well.
Yeah.
And the idea that, and I've shared this with you, I want to do some news shows.
Yeah, I know you do.
That to me is just, I can just imagine, just the thought of somebody's driving home after work, and then to hear my voice on telling them about what's gone on during the day. That just is cool.
Talk with Althea. Well, okay, we have to end this now. So I'm going to end the live stream. Hang on just a minute. And
so pay attention to it all, folks. We'll be putting out notice. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you.
And please join us at KBOO. It's going to be fun.
Yes, it's going to be a lovely time.
Thank you. And if you're watching us Tuesday, March 6th, and you're watching us live, and today we're going to be talking about gun control, the pros and cons of it. And we have a very thoughtful psychologist with us, Stefan Tobin. Thank you so much for coming, Dr.
You're welcome.
Tobin.
You're welcome, Caleb.
And this is an important issue, and Dr. Tobin said that he was willing to discuss it, so I'm glad here. I mean, the tragedies that we see unfolding every month, and the feeling of hopelessness. You're a psychologist. I would imagine that you also deal with people feeling hopeless about things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a very difficult situation.
It also seems like every we go chugging on, and there's horror show after horror show, and kids and families and so on just feel so helpless to deal with this thing.
And we don't realize it. It's not really publicized, but the aftermath of people that were not injured but were present.
Yes.
The trauma that they feel, probably for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I was mentioning earlier, I was evaluating a person today who was suffering from PTSD. When he was 17 years of age, he saw his best friend take out a gun and shoot himself in the head. And he was in a room of 7 people, but it really affects him now. I mean, really strong PTSD symptoms. There are like there are $2.8 billion per year in hospital costs for those wounded in these battles, and that doesn't take into account the psychic, the emotional harm as well.
Yeah,
it's just crazy. If you were in a car and you hit someone, the person injured would have some way to be paid, or at least hospital bills, but not if they're shot on the street.
Yeah, and it is. There are people that see this as a health issue, but the CDC,
for your people that you want to serve, Joe Biden, I think is a fantastic example of that sense of empathy, that sense of understanding to the common man. Especially when it comes to loss because of his son. I mean, he's just so sincere, and it does give him that broader perspective that people recognize that he has. Do you feel that do you feel that is helping you relate better to the voter, or to better understand and deal with those issues that they're facing?
Absolutely. In my conversations with people around Oregon City, I just feel like I actually connect to the things that they're really frustrated with on a deeper level. So especially a lot of my conversations when I first entered into the race had to do with people distrusting of the local government. And from my personal background, I grew up in Wallowa County, Oregon, and outside of that being 80% of Wallowa County voted for Trump, there are even more people that just don't vote. And growing up in that area, it comes from, we look at elected officials, and then we look down at our own lives and we say, it doesn't matter who we elect, nothing's really changing, nothing's really improving for my life. And so you just get this voter apathy because you look at the things that you're struggling with, or your parents, or your kids, and you go, why do I need to vote? Right. What good is it going to do me? And I think a lot of that has to come with looking at the people that you have for choices, and you go, what do they know about me, right? What do they know about the problems that I'm going through? And then you don't want to vote for any of them because of that reason, because they can talk the talk, but the moment that they're going to get elected, nothing will happen. And I think that's that disconnect from lack of experience that a lot of the people in Oregon City are going through right now.
There's some validity to what you say there. I would venture to say that running for the right reasons for mayor of Oregon City. Next up, I'm going to have a discussion with Carla Hansen, who is the chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon, and she's on hold right now, so I'm going to go ahead and bring her in. Hi, good evening. Casey, are you there?
Yes. Is this okay, or should I take it off speaker?
You may want to take it off speaker. I hear some crackling.
Okay, got it.
Oh, there we go. Now I hear you.
All right.
Excellent. Hey, thank you for taking some time out of your day to speak with me.
Absolutely. looking forward to it here.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, I just had a wonderful interview with Alex Josephi, who is running for Oregon City Mayor. And Casey, he reminded me of some of a real fundamental reason of why people run for office. And it makes me feel good. He's very focused on his life experience and how his life experience can be brought to the table to do good for his constituents. So I just
that's great.
You know, I like that. That's core fundamental reasons why someone wants to run for office, and so I just share that with you. You know, but. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about specifically, as chair of the Democratic Party of Oregon, we just went through a crazy 2020 general election. You know,
no kidding.
That was the strangest election cycle I've ever participated in. What are some of the lessons that you learned, the party learned from the 2020 election?
I learned what a great team of activists we have all over the state, and it's something I knew, but the way, you know, our Democratic activists, you know, from Baker County to the coast, from the metro area to Curry County, folks work really hard to, you know, both express the Democratic message and to elect candidates. And they, you know, my hat's off to every single county precinct committee person, every single county chair and officer. I mean, folks did a phenomenal job. Now, as far as what our takeaway from the election is, Oregon did really well. I think one of the things a lot of us were surprised at is how much Trump brought out his base. And we kind of expected he would still bring a significant base, but there is, you know, 92% Republican turnout, which is pretty phenomenal. Now, our turnout was high too. It was in that arena too, but it was, to me, it was somewhat surprising that there wasn't more sloughing off from that Trump base.
Correct the norms that have been taken advantage of by Trump and the
with how Congress works, especially in appropriations, but I have heard and did do research on how our government works with the military. There were actually people out there, this is how they got people to believe, QAnon got people to believe and come to the Capitol and ransack it the way they did. They were saying that, and this is part of the story, that if everybody needs to just go to the inauguration and sit through it and know that Trump is still president in the background, he's still going to be president, and in the middle of the inauguration, the military is going to come in and grab Biden and Obama and Hillary and everybody who was there and go set them in front of a military tribunal. And I was waiting for next they're going to be hit with the execution by gunshot, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so for people who don't know, in this nation, that does not happen, mm-hmm. Okay? The only people who go in front of a military tribunal or a military court of any sort are military people who do crimes, you know?
Right.
The civilians, even if a civilian person hurts a military person, that civilian is seen in a civilian court. Federal, probably, because it's military, your government property. So they would be seen in a federal court, civilian. Our Americans do not go in front of military tribunals. We are not Iraq, or the way Iraq used to be. We are not Afghanistan. We are not a Middle Eastern developing nation. We are the United States of America, and we are a land of laws. And for the Republicans to stand there and allow Trump to have his way with our nation is ridiculous, and it needs to not happen. This is a time for Biden to stand up and say enough.
Amen. You know, and I think it goes even beyond our leadership, you know, and I think Joe Biden is at least beginning to correct the norms that have been taken advantage of by Trump, and the norms that have been flouted by Trump. It fundamentally changed. It was an attempt to fundamentally change these basic values of our country. And Biden is slowly but surely, through executive order and through the power of the bully pulpit and through his ability now with the majority in Congress in both the Senate and the House, to correct some of the Trump administration's most obvious attempps at bringing down our democracy or changing the democracy to the government to something in his image. You know, it just amazes me. And you know what else really just shocks me is the acquiescence of so many people. You know, I do understand that this has been developing, and this has been evolving over a 10, 15, 20-year period of time. But to see it come to a fruition point like the way it did. Oh, no, it's been longer than that. Yeah, I mean, well, you could point back to the Southern Strategy as the actual beginning of the GOP pushing towards or embracing racist methods, dog whistles, and to try to rally the white vote against the minorities.
But I mean modern day.
Republican senators, during the carbon bill, they walked out. Guess who paid for their hotel rooms in Idaho? The fossil fuel industry. So,
wow.
Yeah, so if we don't get these big money pressures off of the senators and the House members, they're not free to do the people's work. You know, they're going to be constantly doing the corporate work or the special interests, the PAC monies. You know,
and the funny thing is, when you get right down to it with campaign finance, and I'm going to dip into it just because it's such a fun topic to talk about for me. It's such an important topic to talk about.
It's the heart and the center of the web. It's like it affects almost every issue.
And that was kind of my point, was how the insidiousness of that campaign contribution from those special interests can jade any good candidate, can jade any good elected, it seems to me. I mean, no one is Superman or Superwoman, and when it comes to, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And I have a friend that puts it so well. It's like a form of legal bribery in that sense.
Soft corruption, I've heard it called.
Soft corruption, yeah. And so...
And we're one of 5 states that have no limits whatsoever, which is pretty shocking for Oregonians. Think we're so progressive, you know, with the bottle bill and the beach law, and to find out that we're one of 5, you know,
right.
Down there with Mississippi that have no limits whatsoever. That was shocking, and that's the first thing I ran on in 2018, along with these other reforms that would follow, because my promise first is that we're not taking any corporate money. We're not taking any PAC money, and we have a $1,000 limit per person, so there'll be no big Phil Knight money coming in, you know, like, and what we've seen, Moses, just since like 98 was $2 million for the governor's race. And then Dudley and Kitzhaber was $17 million. Right. And then that last race with Brown and Bueller that I was in was almost $40 million. See, and now this race, if we don't get this under control, is it going to be $60 million?
That's right. You know, I see the challenge that you as a candidate will have, especially given that you're kind of you're adhering to these limits and no one else is. It's not mandatory for them to adhere to those limits, and so one could say it's kind of tying an arm behind your back before you even start the race. Do you think that's going to be, how big of an obstacle is that going to be, do you feel?
Republican senators, during the carbon bill, they walked out. Guess who paid for their hotel rooms in Idaho? The fossil fuel industry. So,
wow.
Yeah, so if we don't get these big money pressures off of the senators and the House members, they're not free to do the people's work. You know, they're going to be constantly doing the corporate work or the special interests, the PAC monies, you know.
You know, and the funny thing is, when you get right down to it with campaign finance, and I'm going to dip into it just because it's such a fun topic to talk about for me. It's such an important topic to talk about.
What's the heart and the center of the web? It's like it affects almost every issue.
And that was kind of my point, was how the insidiousness of that campaign contribution from those special interests. You're adhering to these limits and no one else is. It's not mandatory for them to adhere to those limits. And so one could say it's kind of tying an arm behind your back before you even start the race. Do you think that's going to be, how big of an obstacle is that going to be, do you feel?